there was a quiet, secluded village deep in the mountains. Among the locals, chilling stories about the northern lights had been circulating for a long time, which occasionally appeared in the sky and plunged the villagers into nightmares. The northern lights were said to harbor a dark and mysterious force. Under the cover of night, this force would unfold and summon creatures from other worlds. People increasingly believed that the northern lights were the gateway between these worlds. One day, a strange stranger arrived in the village, a lonely traveler who captivated everyone with his sparkling eyes and mysterious smile. The stranger claimed to have seen the northern lights and to be able to communicate with the beings hidden within its light. The villagers were initially skeptical, but curiosity eventually overcame them. One night, they gathered in the center of the village to meet the stranger and set off towards the northern lights together. As the group made their way into the forest, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Darkness filled the woods, and shadows danced beneath the trees' foliage. Everyone moved forward in silence. Only the rustling of leaves and the sound of footsteps could be heard. Then suddenly, like lightning striking the sky, the northern lights flashed. A greenish-purple beam of light danced in the sky, mesmerizing the people. Trembling, the villagers watched as the northern lights brought the invisible creatures closer and closer to their world. The stranger began to speak softly, his voice seemingly carried by the winds. He told stories of those beings who wander within this light, seeking to return to the human world. They were the shadows, feeding on souls, and fear nourished them. As the northern lights hovered directly above them, the villagers anxiously gazed at the sky. Then suddenly, like predators, the shadows descended upon them. They appeared as dark figures, their cold gaze engulfing the souls of the people. The villagers screamed and tried to flee, but the shadows were everywhere. There was nowhere to hide from them. Meanwhile, the stranger smiled as the shadows swirled around them. The tormenting presence of the shadows lasted throughout the night. The people fought desperately for survival until finally, the northern lights faded away, and the shadows returned to the other world. In the morning, as the sunlight once again shone, the stranger escorted the villagers back to the village. The people were convinced that they should never expose themselves to the dangers of the northern lights again. The terror of the shadows remained deeply buried in their hearts, serving as a reminder of the eerie night when the northern lights cast a shadow over their lives. In the village, they never spoke of the northern lights again, and the stranger was never seen again. But those brave individuals who survived the night's horror always look up at the night sky with fear, hoping that the northern lights will never return. There was an abandoned village deep in the embrace of the dark woods. This village was held captive by some mystical force, and the locals cautiously avoided the night. There was a dark secret in everyone, which resembled a nightmare: the nightlight. The phenomenon of the nightlight appeared every night and danced above the village. It was wonderfully beautiful, but those who watched it for a longer time noticed that something was not right with it. The nightlight not only illuminated, but also attracted and disturbed people's minds. A young girl was obsessively curious about the nightlight. The villagers always warned her not to get close to it, but the young girl had no fears. One night, as the villagers fell into a deep sleep, the young girl put on her cloak and set out to find the nightlight. As she approached the forest, the air was filled with tension. Darkness swallowed the path, and the trees cast shadows on the road. The girl walked through the morning fog, and her heart beat stronger and stronger as she focused on the nightlight. After long minutes, she finally reached a clearing. The nightlight seemed to float there, like an inviting lamp in the night. However, as the girl got closer to the nightlight, a strange and chilling feeling took hold of her, but her curiosity did not allow her to turn back. As the nightlight illuminated her face, the young girl suddenly saw the reality. The nightlight was not a clever light show, but something much darker and more dangerous. The nightlight was connected to a dark force that summoned special creatures from the world of shadows. Shadows appeared in the nightlight, deadly eerie figures that fed on the energy of the soul. The girl, who had entered the realm of unknown creatures, began to feel that her life was in danger. The shadows surrounded her, approaching with steps, and slowly floated towards her with their huge black wings. The girl tried to scream, but her voice died in her throat. The shadows bound her with their power and began to drain her soul energy. The girl's eyes dimmed, all her strength left her body, and only the shadow of death remained, which finally sucked her in. In the morning, when the villagers realized that the girl had disappeared, they immediately set out to find her. They eventually found her in the forest. The girl's body lay lifeless on the ground with a look of fear on her face. The villagers never dared to look towards the nightlight again. The story of the young girl lived on in the village as a warning of the dangers of darkness and the nightlight. There was a small fishing village in the Arctic where the sun rarely appeared on the horizon for months. Every year, a peculiar phenomenon occurred in the village: the appearance of the northern lights. This mystical light phenomenon shimmered in the sky, dazzling the village residents with its radiant green, blue, and purple colors. People gazed in awe at the northern lights, but at the same time, they felt fear towards it. Legends had circulated in the village over the centuries, telling tales of the northern lights being a soul thief. Allegedly, when the northern lights appeared, dangerous creatures emerged from their dark hiding places, waiting for the opportunity to attack people. One night, when the northern lights were stronger than ever, the villagers gathered to observe the mesmerizing spectacle together. As the flood of light danced above their heads, a sudden cold gust of wind rushed through them. The people's hearts froze as dark shadows crossed the northern lights and approached them. Under the light of the northern lights, the creatures gradually became visible. They screamed madly and attacked the villagers. They were terrifying figures, their eyes burning with fire and their decaying bodies emitting a deadly stench. The people desperately tried to escape, but the shadows were everywhere, blocking every path to freedom. Fear and panic reigned in the village. People screamed and ran, but the shadows relentlessly pursued them. The more shadows they destroyed, the more emerged, like an infinite horde emerging from the darkness. When all hope seemed lost, a young woman named Elena snapped out of her terror and had a sudden realization. The northern lights not only brought danger, but also gave power to the shadows. The people had to reverse this power. Elena gathered all her strength and charged towards the northern lights, holding a massive torch in her hand. As she approached the northern lights, her power gradually increased. Elena shouted an ancient incantation, and a massive explosion of light erupted. The power of the northern lights transformed and repelled the shadows. The people joined Elena and united to drive the darkness out of the village. As the power of the northern lights wiped out the shadows, the villagers looked up at the sky with relief and exhaustion, but also as victors. The northern lights continued to shine, but from now on, it symbolized protection rather than destruction. From then on, the village held celebrations every year in honor of the northern lights, and remembered to bravely face fear and fight against darkness. Elena, who saved the village, left behind an eternal memory, and the village gratefully referred to her as the hero of the northern lights.